It recording?
It is recording. I am stuck in my office tonight because I'm snowed in. So we figured we'd do some podcasting. I would like to still backtrack on that whole street epistemology week that the Mormon Stories thing did, because I have a million and one little thoughts on all that, because it ties into the epistemology of the world of praxis that we're dealing with. So check this out. Check this. There's like a book and all this stuff.
Beautiful trouble.
Look how built out this is. Creative tools for a more just world.
Action Lab.
Where did you find this website?
This was mentioned today on James Lindsay's own on his Subscribe Star, and he was talking about you can not just it's just called Beautiful Trouble, and he says that not only like if you go listen to a bunch of AOC stuff, she'll mention Beautiful Trouble, and people bring up Beautiful Trouble all the time. Someone pointed to it to him. I mean, if you go into it, strategy cards, like a revolution in a box.
Just using the Google, the first thing it says is Beautiful Trouble. Dive into the Beautiful Trouble toolbox, an interconnected web of ideas and creative best practices that puts the power in your hands. This is terrifying. So
Look
who's
at these
behind
cards.
this?
He says all sorts of people have just been using it and using it for a while. So like some of this stuff, not only are we saying it's kind of getting trickled down through academia, but they've really fleshed out a lot of basic things on how to do better praxis in the world. Look at the yellow pigs in parliament, general strike, choose your target wisely, passive
Action
ally,
logic.
neutral.
Choose your target wisely. Like it's fun how much like they're pulling from militaristic speak and business speak best practices. Yeah. But there's no organized leftist revolution going on. Don't be crazy.
Tactics, principles.
They've got a bunch of Arabic, French translators, a couple Spanish translators, a couple Italian, a couple Portuguese. And did I see Russian? No.
Theory. A structural analysis of oppression and a practical organization strategy working towards a society.
And also when they say a structural analysis, because like normal speak, you're thinking like, well that sounds like some kind of rigid analytical tool, structural analysis. But it's not.
Praxis, action, tactics, action design, campaign strategy, capitalism.
Praxis. James Lindsay started talking about cultural Marxism, and they memory hold the Wikipedia page about how cultural Marxism is a part of Marxist thought. And like on the recent episode, he said praxis, get it into your head, praxis. And I just thought like, well, I wonder how long until praxis has like the anti-Semitic banner on Wikipedia. Like, oh, this is a far right conspiracy theory.
Look at this. This looks like it's like an Etsy page or something like that.
Clandestine leafleting.
Creative disruption. You could disrupt an illegitimate event by shouting or thuggery.
See, by shouting or thuggery. And also, what do they mean by an illegitimate event?
Any event by those fascists, I'm assuming. It's often better to disrupt by song, glitter, or clever theatrics. Cultural disobedience, civil disobedience is the deliberate violation of unjust laws.
Glitter can be extremely destructive. Glitter is one of the most stupidly destructive things if applied properly.
Oh, yeah. How to do a blockade. It's a fun afternoon event.
Casero lasso? Flash mob.
Distributed action. Currency hacking. What?
What's infiltration say?
Look, it says to do a hoax.
It says to do a hoax. Identity correction? Wait, what? What is identity correction?
An act of activist ventriloquism in which you momentarily assume the mask of power to speak a little lie that tells a greater truth.
Oh, that's when they dress up as Proud Boys.
Yep.
It's okay.
Or
There's
that's
that thing
kind of that entryism thing too, of like go pretend like you're the person so you can get into it.
I always forget the special Arabic name for it, but there's a controversial concept in Islam about it's okay to lie to infidels, um, as long as it's in the service of the ultimate good. Occupation, like your occupation or physically occupying contested space to create community. What a hilarious idea of community. Because like there's video of like just from a couple years ago of those maniacs busting up you know, the local inland port controversy.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I mean, it's going on for years. These Marxist maniacs. I mean, you can just look up like inland port protest on YouTube, and there's a bunch of video of it. They did that thing. They occupied and created a community, and you can look up the video of how their community went, especially when the police got there, and then they all lied about it. In fact, that was the local acquaintance of mine. I called him out on that because he was leading that thing, and he said, "Oh, a cop punched me in the face. It's on video. We're going to press charges." At that point, like I wasn't even antagonistic toward him in any way. I was just like, "Where's the video?" Because like I watched like 40 minutes of video. I'm like, what video? Show me the video. And so I started pestering him. I looked into it a bunch more, and I'm like, "Oh, you guys lied about all of this. The police did nothing wrong. You guys were entirely in the wrong. You're just communists." And you think that the world is yours and it's okay for you to occupy this space and stop these people from going through their stupid due process instead of objecting in reasonable ways. What's wrong with good old fashioned First Amendment airing of grievances the way the forefathers intended? But I've learned enough now that like, oh, no, all of that, none of that's all upholding the structures of oppression, to actually just try to put together a reasonable opposition and make your case rather than physically occupying the way this tile says to do. I kept asking them, like, show me the video, dude. Or come out now and say, you know what, there wasn't video. But I did get punched. Like, okay, then we can have your he said, she said thing. That's when I first saw these guys. Like, oh, these guys are just liars.
They build into their worldview that they should be lying. Look at this, right on the what we do. There's the word praxis. From book to community of praxis. For anyone who doesn't know, is putting the theory.
Praxis. Community of praxis is a really evil euphemism for violent mob.
Yep.
That's what praxis they literally mean by a community of praxis.
Putting theory into practice, and it comes from Marx.
Communities of not praxis are like people raising kids and going to church and going to work and shoveling snow and doing the nuts and bolts of making civilization go by. That's a community without praxis. Community of praxis is just a violent mob.
I love that this whole thing is like to split creativity, humor, joy, and mischief can play in the struggle for a better world. It's for like a modern Sesame Street generation,
It really is. And it makes it all fun. Look at all this. Like, I mean, it looks just like any other, like, I was going to say, did you look at this? This is because I want to know, like, who's behind this? Like, who funds this?
Request a training.
Oh my God, let's request a training.
I want the strategy cards, man. I mean, that stuff would be helpful for me to memorize the terms. But this is kind of one of the deals. You go talking to somebody and you use these terms. And you and I, coming from like a realm of having learned them from reading it from the academia, you can come across some person who hasn't read a stitch of any of it, but they'll still kind of know some of the words.
Like, there's no correlation between how good a missionary you are and how read you are on scripture. None whatsoever. What matters is, do you get the message?
Exactly. They've done as much message creating as that little pink book in Mormon world as you'd ever seen. I think I do want the strategy cards.
How do you get them? What is Action Lab? The Action Lab is
$35
for creative campaign. $35 for cards?
I don't want my info on their website, man.
Oh, just order it under John Galt. They won't notice.
106 oversized cards.
Oh my God. The Action Lab's an incubator for creating campaigns and cultural interventions. I wonder what a cultural intervention is. I wonder if these people are Marxists. I wonder if cultural Marxism
drop the words praxis all over and
is
all
maybe
that
not just a wacky right-wing conspiracy theory. Even
but
though
that is one of the...
it is now.
Because I mean, we've got it. You said you got it through like listening to Lindsay's other stuff, but that or not, if anybody's listening here, people get upset in general if you start just calling willy nilly any sort of person a Marxist who hasn't full out said, "I am a communist in my economics." What the ultimate point is that Marxism is a revolutionary theory, not a theory of economics. Because Marx's economics always sucked, even back in Das Kapital and all those books where he did try to parse out some sort of economics. People have already, through time, laughed at how crappy his actual economic theory was, even back in the time where he actually did try to put numbers to it. But it's not about the numbers. It's about how to do revolution. That's what's carried on. That's what's sparked the minds of so many through the ages and made people decide that they want to come up with different versions of it. But usually also when I'm saying, hey, these guys are pulling in some ideas of Marxist thought into their activism against the Mormon church or something like that, is that they're using certain tactics like these tactics to try to go after
nonviolent direct action. Did you see this? There's a resistance hotline.
I did see that, yeah.
Wow. Solidarity does not equal aid. What? What's that mean? It's a project of beautiful trouble. Alrighty. Oh, I just watched this whole.
You watched the whole thing? I'm just going to show the first little itsy bitsy bit of it here, but I think it is kind of funny because I remember watching it way back in the day. I didn't even remember that he started off comparing the activism side using a quote from Marx. But
what I thought was funny was listening to this. And granted, like it, I knew it was from 5 years ago, but he's like, now none of us expected the events that happened last summer.
And he's not talking about 2020.
Yeah, and he's talking about stuff that like I was talking to my friends about, and they were like, they thought that I was listening to Rush Limbaugh or something.
I think he was talking about some of the fire burning that happened around like Milo Yiannopoulos going to Berkeley, and
yeah, but like because. I mean, I had one friend tell me to my face that none of it was real and I was making it up.
Let's listen.
Dr. Pepper.
Now, what I'd like to do is look at universities from the perspective of moral psychology. And I'm going to show you two different ways of looking at a university. I'm going to open with two quotations from dead white men writing in London in the 1840s. So very, very
You think about that, like at the university, he's already having to stop and apologize at the start of a lecture to make people wait. Well, I know these are dead white men.
I think he was kind of doing it satirically to make.
He was, but it was already. I mean, think how ridiculous that would have sounded in 2010.
Oh yeah, well,
but it already wasn't in 2017.
No, I mean, just think about how many times John DeLynn talks about white man.
Yeah,
has to put an old white guy. It's like as if that says something. Anyway.
Narrow range of human thought here, but extraordinarily far apart. And what they said.
No, I think he's not being. I don't think he's. There's a hint of irony, but at the same time, he's admitting, like, I know that's a narrow range of human thought. These dead white men,
Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe because I guess.
Well, it's not that
he's talking to a young audience.
Yeah, he's probably at some Ivy League type college area, and he already knows that he has to preamble that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that's the case now. Is that, I mean, you can't take it for granted that a college graduate understands like how the scientific method is supposed to work.
Or they weren't already just shutting off at that time, saying, "Oh, dead white men."
Is resonating and playing out today. So John Stuart Mill in On Liberty, John Stuart Mill is so wise about human frailties, foibles, biases, the awfulness of our thinking in many cases, and how it is that we need each other to think better, to correct our thinking. So as he wrote, he who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be...
This is why... The past several years, if people actually get into debates with me on this stuff, there's a lot of times where like I could imagine up a person who would be hard to debate. Once or twice I've come across one. But normally it's not hard at all because they just know nothing about what your actual side is or even what another side that you're standing up for is.
Yeah. It's like when we run into like a greenie missionary.
Yeah.
And they try to tell us what Mormonism is all about. It's like,
But that's the exact thing that I've been trying or dream of trying to get across to the ex-Mormon community is like you've gotten so insular that you are just like that way. The same that way we will in the ex-Mormon community, they'll joke, or even in the atheist community, they'll say, I've read the more than your Bible than you have. And part of that whole entire beautiful trouble thing, beyond the beautiful trouble thing, that's kind of like the dumbed down, feed it to the masses version creation of it. But we've gone over a lot of the reading the Bible of what all that stuff is, like where that comes from. And it's so often, every once in a while, I'll come across somebody who really is a true believer who's read all the stuff. But most of the times, they don't know what they're regurgitating. And you're like, I've read your stuff. You haven't read your stuff. I've read your stuff. The same way atheists used to do that to Bible bashers, or the same way,
Yeah.
Good, and no one may have been able to refute them. But if he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion.
I've only read secondary things on Hegel, but I've read secondary things on Hegel for years and years and years because I don't want to go sit and read the original Hegel. From all I can tell, from everything I've ever read, Lindsay got it right. One of the things I went and did is I went and listened to a bunch of Hegel professors who were sneeringly, angrily trying to critique James Lindsay. So I go and try to listen because if you don't know the arguments, And so I listen to these guys critique James Lindsay, and some of the things that they do is just such BS, because one of the reasons that they don't really know what they're talking about is because they didn't really listen to all of James Lindsay's different stuff. They just kind of hear these little clips and say it out of context and don't realize that he clarified stuff himself. And I was listening to them, and one of the things he said is like, James Lindsay thinks Hegel's a cookbook. And I go, no, Karl Marx thought Hegel was a cookbook, you dipshits. And you guys know that, that all of the Hegelians, the modern current day Hegelians, think Karl Marx is a cookbook. That's just one of those other things where the error that was made by some other philosopher now gets attributed to the critic,
Yeah. It's pretty maddening.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Now contrast that, or think of a university based on Mill's principles, and it's going to clearly be one that strives to represent diverse views. It's going to reach out for viewpoint diversity and encourage a culture of debate and challenge, and only in that way can we find truth together. On the other hand, Karl Marx, writing right around the same time, this is a quote that I've heard a lot, and when I Googled it, what I found, the exact words, they're pretty similar. He wrote, the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it.
Praxis. That's you can draw back to Marx of him starting to say that my theory needs to put into action,
Now, you can hear his frustration with the professors, the academics, who will talk endlessly about this or that distinction, and he's saying, no, we need a revolution, we need to change. And so if we imagine a university based on a more Marxist approach to intellectual life, it's going to look extremely different. Now, what kind of university do you want? Do you want one focused on finding truth through debate, or one focused ultimately on changing the world? And I'll ask you to vote at the end of this talk. When I arrived at Yale in 1981, this is what it said over the gate, over the main gate to the old campus, Lux et Veritas. It's written right there in stone, Veritas, truth. I was inducted into an institution with a long sense of tradition going back. You really feel that link back to the academy and the debates and the symposium and the ways that these early philosophers would argue and in that way improve each other's thinking. But beginning in the 1990s, I believe, universities began to change. What was written over their doorway.
The 1990s, beginning of that, why does he believe the 1990s?
Began to change. And I think they began to adopt change itself as more of the motto, the mantra. And not just any change, not just change for the sake of change, but social justice particularly. Social justice becomes much more important in the life of universities, I believe, in the 1990s. First, of course, from the various studies departments, the gender studies, race studies, all the different ethnic studies departments and areas, but then also the humanities more broadly.
Where I accidentally went, doggone it, I was created by you knuckleheads. I didn't ask for this.
Now, let me make clear that many of the changes these brought about by these forces in the 1990s were for the good. To the extent that the faculty became diversified, that's all to the good. To the extent that the areas studied, why study just the leaders and the kings and the presidents? Why not study the common people, the people who are oppressed? So,
was that ever a time where history was that narrow? I read so much as a kid, so much of this stuff where people are like, they never talked about it. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, I read this stuff, like, I don't know, when the CRT thing's like, oh, we just want to talk about the real history of racism in America. I'm like, no, I've read Huckleberry Finn. You guys want to ban that book, you stupid assholes.
There's this longer video, maybe we'll watch it one day, about critical race theory in music and how the musical theory is all based off of dead white men,
It's not. I mean, I guess as much as the ancient Greeks were white, were they? Do we know? Does anybody know?
It goes off there's the ancient Greeks, and then that most of it was charted out by the Germans in like the 1700s.
And also, like, it's not arbitrary.
But
it's a thing that you discover. Now, I really do wonder, though, are the ancient Greeks white as far as the whole dead white guy thing concerns? Like,
I should find the.
I wonder.
Well, it depends on what your practice is at the moment. If you want to hate them, you call them white. If you want to incorporate them in, you call them not white. But I remember I was watching. I should find the video. Some lady on PBS saying that the reason white supremacists think that the old Greeks were white are because of all the white statues lost their paint. And it was just one of those moments, and it's PBS. I was watching, this is one of the rare times in the past couple of years I was watching something on TV, and I was just sitting there with my jaw open, because there's so many of things like that 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 the person just created this complete knuckleheaded assertion that they're not going to have to go verify anyway. Like show me one white supremacist group who said, hey, look, the statue David is white, so we're superior. like that they're pointing to that as the reason that they but
no, it's made up.
Yeah. But that's the type of stuff gets laundered in as since the 90s.
Well, like, I mean, they've managed to create there's a mass hallucination now in America where the history of American law enforcement is founded in slave catching. Like, because again, like, I was a kid, like, I read books about
that's
the 19th
one of the things
century.
that they're trying to.
Like,
I actually had a thing to pull up on that later. The 1619 Project stuff. They might be doing it with even just the concept of universities too, but they want to poison the roots, uproot the thing that they're criticizing, and say from the start this thing was based in a racism or something like that. The 1619 Project is trying to say the founding of the United States of America was based off of trying to maintain slavery, which is just a recreation, a reimagining that just didn't exist. It's just pulled right out of the butt of the author.
No, I mean, you can just carry it on and say, like, the invention of seagoing vessels was for slavery.
Yeah.
You know, the schools of navigation that permitted people to make these journeys.
You could literally do it to anything.
That's all for slavery.
The problem is people have. I also made the joke in the past that, like, it's hard to write one of these papers. Why is it hard? It's hard to find a new idea that hasn't already been done this way. So that's all that's hard. And
no, I mean, I've been a giant Wikipedia nerd for as long as Wikipedia's been around. It's one of my favorite things. I go to bed reading Wikipedia. And I have watched as it pops up, like, in just the most random places. And now I recognize it, and I see it more and more, where something will just pop up where you can see it's just some like critical theory axe grinder popping something in about like, oh, you know, because there'll be something about cinnamon being grown in some weird island, and then there'll be something about like, oh, and there's a racial disparity in how much aid these cinnamon growers get from the international, and like, and you just see them sneaking it in everywhere that goes.
I wanted to pull up that Beatles article. Thank you for you
That
landed
is
on
the
it.
thing. That was just coincidence that came together.
Yeah, you weren't even talking about the thing we were just talking about. That whatever made me think of it.
I can't believe how many freaking so Ringo Starr has put out 20 studio albums and a few EPs.
Nuh-uh. I would have thought Paul put out way more.
Well, see, I was just about to look, but I kind of wonder. He's put out a lot too. It's just funny because not a single one of them has been any good. Oh my God, there's a lot of information about him. What is he, the most successful songwriter in history or something? There's a whole section on drugs.
So this article came out in NPR this week. How did we get stuck with the idea that 4 white guys make a rock band? And it's so funny how like they weave it into everything. What's really fascinating to me is how can I put this? Like this person here is very well practiced in doing these exact same types of writings. The whole entire worldview gets infused into every little ounce of it, but they're still able to kind of make it something new. It's not like it's done by some BuzzFeed writer who's going to be like, ugh, they're 4 white guys. What this person had to do to write closer to like an academic style writing, what she has to do all throughout it is point to other writings where other people have already said that type of thing. So that's what I'm talking about. Like there's some work that has to go into it. The work she had to do is show that she'd already read all the other people who'd already said the same thing and weaves it into her writing. That's what I'm saying is actually difficult about this type of writing when you're writing it in the school, is that you have to then also include that you've already read all the other bullcrap articles about how the Beatles are whiteys, or not mentioning Billy Preston enough was racist, any sort of thing like that. You get to the bottom of it and you realize, man, you had to do a lot of research just to say something the BuzzFeed guy could have said. And does anybody notice that all these white bands are white guys? And so there is like a bunch of work that you have to put into it to do it at the academic level.
The whole premise of the question, go scroll back up to the top. How did we get stuck with the idea that 4 white guys make a rock band? What? Says who? We're not.
Yeah.
Since when?
Yep.
Like, since when? What? How? Like, are you totally ignorant of the history of rock and roll, or are you just pretending? I mean,
ask young 13-year-old Chris Hanna what are some of the, because I mean I wasn't even into that many rock bands yet at that time. I didn't find sort of things like that, so I was kind of just whatever was super mainstream. What would have been one of the 5 rock bands I would have known? I would have known Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, who is considered the greatest rock guitarist of all time? Jimi Hendrix. Everybody says that, and they've said it since before we were born.
I knew who Prince was at that time. I like to think back to my dumb little white Mormon brain when I was 8, 9, 10, and what stuff did I know? And I knew Prince. I knew 30 things. I knew Prince. I knew 30 things. I knew Michael Jackson. I knew 30 things. I knew Jimi Hendrix.
My parents were not into rock and roll. Neither of my parents were into rock and roll growing up. So my dad listened to Dixieland jazz, and he listened to Preservation Hall.
Yeah, you knew fancy stuff.
And so I saw Preservation Hall 5 times before I ever saw a rock band growing up on tour. And then I went to New Orleans and I saw Preservation Hall. And now Preservation Hall is a rotating cast of musicians. You know, they're all black.
Yeah.
Every single one of them was black.
The first radio
where do we get
station
stuck with the idea that Dixieland jazz has to be a bunch of black guys? Well, we're not stuck with the idea. Some of it is just a happenstance of culture and geography.
Before I listened to rock, I listened to oldies. When I was a little kid, I listened to oldies. And why did I listen to oldies? Because I wanted to hear the Temptations. The first band I wanted to catch on the radio, if you call it a band, was the Temptations. That's who I wanted to hear. And it wasn't because I try to think about, like, what did I even think about black people at that time? There wasn't like the faux benevolent side of it either.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to hear them because I wanted to benevolently hear black people. I wanted to hear the best song that I liked. You know,
This reminds me of what makes me annoyed is having been chased out of watching women's soccer by so-called women's soccer fans, really just feminists. But like, because I've just been into women's soccer for over 20 years because I'm into soccer and I've watched a lot of it. And I'm not doing it like, to do one for the ladies. Like, no, play good soccer and I'll watch. Like, that's all.
yeah.
But then over the last few years, it was turned into a moral thing, where it's like the only reason people don't watch women's soccer is because they're sexist, or if they do, I mean, in my case, it was I wasn't doing it good enough, I guess. If just 1 out of 10,000 people I ever heard say not enough people watch women's soccer just went to a women's soccer game, we wouldn't be having the conversation. But of course, it's not about reality; it's about Hegelian axe grinding. So first off, where did Ann Powers here get the idea that we were stuck with the idea that 4 white guys? Because like I was saying, like Dixieland jazz musicians were always black people to me. But it's not like I was like, oh, I am never allowed to play jazz music. Like, no, I did. My dad encouraged me to do it. In fact, my dad, because he was into all that old time music, and he was into Scott Joplin, black guy. And when I was 14 years old, my dad paid me $20 to write a ragtime, and it's called the $20 rag. And I'm a white guy. Like, they want to say like, oh, we don't want to even acknowledge the history of racism and what the role it played in rock and roll music. It's like, no. The difference is we do acknowledge it. It's that you're trying to turn it into like this creepy thing that it has no, like, it's totally inappropriate.
Yeah, that's one of the points I was going to make too, is like that whole video that talks about how critical race theory is used to do better music and that sort of stuff. And they talk about nobody ever once studied like the drumming from India.
Oh no.
Until we brought up critical race theory. And like, shut up. They did too. Like, what are you talking about? That's one of the things is like there's so much about it that's just ignoring and avoiding half of history,
Yeah. Well, Paul Simon's Graceland. What year was that? 86? 84? Do you know?
I don't know the exact date, no.
Because you know the album I'm talking about, though. Because Paul Simon got keyed into African music in a big way. And he released a whole album of Paul Simon, a white guy from New York, songwriter, and it has all of these heavily African influences. And it was his best-selling album. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. 86, yeah. And it wasn't like America threw up their hands in outrage and said, what is all this? What is this crazy? No, people embraced it. White people embraced it. And it led in large part to the whole idea of world music. But none of that is possible under a critical
none of it ever happened.
Yeah, none of it happened. The world started yesterday.
So this whole entire video is trying to show how new modern critical race theory helps to broaden our views of musical theory. But there's also this part of it too. Jonathan McCorder even mentioned it. There's this professor in it. I forget his name.
Who is this guy? I think this
Adam Neely.
Yeah, like I really like his videos. Like, I mean, because like
even this video is a well done video. It's just bullcrap theory.
Well, no, I mean, is because I watched him do a few things that were just about music, and like he's like idiot savant level of music theorist type guy.
There's stuff in this that's worth hearing. The only problem with it is, like I have with so many other things, is that the things that are worth learning about in this were perfectly learnable and always were learnable and always were part of liberal theory, of the liberal world.
And they didn't take 44 minutes to explain.
In which the views and ideas of white persons are held to be more significant than
There's a Mott and Bailey term.
Okay, I started my formal musical training at 5 years old. Nobody ever. In fact, my music teacher was an old German lady with a heavy accent. Like, what more opportunity? What higher likelihood to have a racist music teacher? Never came up. Race never came up.
This guy here I think he was at NYU for a while. I don't think he's there anymore right now, but he makes the extravagant claim that, oh, Beethoven was pretty good. He was okay. And, but
he was only successful because he was white.
Yeah. McWhorter's mentioned him in an article or two.
Which is like, I mean, first, like that, how does that even make sense when all of Beethoven's competition was also white?
But this is part of the problem with all these racial ideology things, which Richard Spencer used to have the same problem too. Richard Spencer would say, as soon as we get back to white, we'll have no more problems. You know what I mean? Like as if the entire world wars weren't fights of white nations versus white nations, you know. But what these guys don't get is there was some supremacy in some of those Germans. And what was their supremacy? It was German supremacy. They were supreme or viewed themselves as supreme over certain Irish writers and that type of stuff, or any sort of other attempts at...
Like the Nazis, Hitler and the Nazis considered the Slavs not white. They were sub-white.
Yep.
And like in our world, like seriously, Russians aren't white people. Not to Hitler, they weren't.
It's so funny, like breaking it down though, but they get into just as much problems of not being able to sort out the contradictions as these white supremacists do. This whole video is worth listening to. It might even dupe you into thinking it's a good point, but the point is that people don't ever understand is like, no, this was all perfectly understandable under liberal ideology, liberal theories, and you didn't need to bring in this concept of racism is always prevalent or overextend your case to make these cases.
I wonder, so like, because you know they say, oh, evil white capitalism tells us what rock bands are. Like, how do you explain North Korea? Where like, as I understand it, in North Korea, like they have classical music, which means traditional Korean music, and then all other music is categorized as jazz.
White anarchists in 2019, you're weak. Somebody on the ground. White baby boomers who were hippies, I'm you. But part of the problem, that's part of what explains why this all happened in the 90s. It all happened in the 90s because those baby boomers, the activists of the 60s, took over the universities. Then they started teaching and training and moving in and doing the entryism, the activism of infiltration, as you saw, they all announced that they want to do on that Beautiful Trouble page, of moving in only their like-minded believers. This is just some guy saying he's reading Hegel. It's just a joke.
Yeah. No, that is one of the things where, like, at the time, I remember having the moment of, like, this doesn't feel like school. But looking back, there are so many times when I realized that, oh, my teachers were doing activism.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that they were all my English teachers.
What's so insidious about this stuff is frequently I've watched it in real time happen when I know what's happening to a person, that someone's getting conscripted into becoming an activist for something that they don't even know what they're getting conscripted into. And they're able to learn and say and do all the things. Like, I frequently joke that back when I was in school in the 2000s, I listened to some of this wackadoo theory stuff. I would imagine in my head these Mormon moms, even the ones my age, of being like, oh gosh, imagine you trying to like say this to them, and let's kind of laugh in my head that like, there's no way that would take over those Mormon moms. Those Mormon moms would never start getting into this stuff. And then I found myself on Facebook, 2019, 2020, all these years later, still active Mormon moms, but they're Mormon mom-splaining me this stuff that
actually racist power plus privilege.
Exactly. Yeah. Or let me explain to you why this activism on the street isn't as dangerous as your speech. You know,
there's so many examples. Like COVID is a threat to America, but not as big a threat as systemic racism.
We got to keep people quarantined up, but they can go out to the streets in droves.
Yeah. Like going, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, how is that not like a brain cracking moment for?
I mean, and that's things like for me, like it was broken almost immediately.
The whole entire thing that I'm getting at today is in the video that I did yesterday of Boot Delin. I've done it a bunch of times that I just kind of use the word activism is almost a pejorative. I just say activism sucks, or activism is like a religion. And I think maybe there's a Mott and Bailey term with that, because I'm thinking of this type of praxis activism, and maybe there's been activism in the past that was perfectly healthy, honest activism, but
I don't know. I think for me, it's like when it becomes who you are and not a thing you do.
Well, I saw
Is that
Lindsay,
a way to put that?
I saw Lindsay Hansen Park ask about it on Facebook one time and said it that way, like, tell me what your activism is, folks. And it's in the same way that they start using the word deconstruction in a way that's religious. They started using activism like that in a way religiously. Jonathan Haidt was saying in that video that it's called the two incompatible values, and one is truth and one is activism. Why can't those two live together? Because when you become a hardcore activist, you start doing, how did you put it in the other podcast? You start saying not all truths are
Useful.
Well, you might have heard that somewhere before. And not criticizing the LDS and all that stuff. I think they're finding out the hard way that they should have just been more direct from the first place. They would have had a better time at it, But that's the same thing with activists. It's like you start undercutting yourself. Somebody in their head thinking that they're totally honest and they're just becoming an extreme activist, they're going to start getting fudgy with the facts. But the top-down meta thinkers of these activists actively say, get fudgy with the facts. We're going to get fudgy with facts because it's more important. It's not useful. Not all truths are useful. So this is one of the ways where you can see where activism starts just messing up something. This is a pretty good article, but it talks about like when you start dealing with counseling, and this sort of theory has taken over the entire counseling world. Not the entire, but most of it. The world that John DeLynn is a part of. This is why I kind of say John DeLynn's going to be inculcated into this stuff, because he's a hemi-ho. I'll get my doctoral thesis so it looks like something when I do my Mormon Stories podcast, just enough to cover it. But just kind of taking it in uncritically, you're going to be inculcated into this sort of thing. You can look at like the direct new mission statements of the American Psychiatric Association, American Psychologist Association, and they're all starting to buy into this stuff like intersectionality and social constructionism and things that are crap for science. As I was talking earlier about social constructionism, these different worldviews start getting into things about looking at people as parts of groups and not as individuals that can help or have any sort of ability to act in the world on their own.
Why is that idea so universally appealing? I should say universally. But it's an idea that won't die and can't be killed. And people just keep somehow just seems to, this class idea just is so appealing. I don't know how else to put it. Because to me, like, it just seems wrong. Like, I understand group dynamics, at least on a surface level, but I also understand, like, the individual is the individual. When I was arguing with my communist friends, and, one of them brought up the idea of, like, socially constructed gender norms, and I just said, men are normally taller than women. Is that a social construct? And obviously they didn't have an answer, and she was reasonable enough to not do the typical Marxist thing where you just get angry and, tip the table over. But, just that, like, really, like, everything is just socially constructed? No. Men are normally taller than women. That's just a fact of biology. Because I've, like, my whole life, I've been able to do the critical tallness studies, where people are like, oh, it must be so nice to be tall. Like, well, cars are all uncomfortable. Airplanes are all uncomfortable. My feet get cold in the winter because the blankets aren't long enough. I have to duck in the shower. In an active shooter situation, I'm a larger target. I can't hide under the cupboard if a rapist comes in the house. Like, there's so many things. Oh, my life expectancy is shorter, you know, because that's things like the taller you are, the more likely you are to die of heart failure. And it's like an exponential graph with height, like it's so easy to play this stupid game. But like, I wouldn't imagine to be like, because that's the thing is like, I'm taller than average, which means that the world is designed too small for me. Right.
Yeah.
Now, like, literally, the world is designed with people smaller than me in mind. And I have to literally try to fit. And I'm not even freakishly tall. I don't even know what it's like for basketball players and stuff. Like, I'm right at the point where it starts to get a little uncomfortable. It's not even serious. But, like, I never once in my life actually thought to seriously pursue that as, like, an activism, or just an idea. Is like, well, damn it, why doesn't the world just make everything 6 inches bigger to accommodate me instead of regular-sized people? Like, they could. Why not just make it... Why not? Why not make everything... every towel 6 inches wider, thank you. Every blanket 6 inches longer, every doorway, every car. Of course I understand why not. Because I'm the one that's different.
So then that gets into like why this starts becoming completely incompatible with counseling. Like It starts out here, like you're supposed to take it at an individual level and meet them where they're at and not come at them. I mean, I think this article specifically mentions like not sitting there and reminding somebody of their privilege, which I had that clip that I put in one of our other videos where the Lynn immediately reminds that girl who was talking about her sexual assault and how privileged she was for getting help. And this specifically says that that's a form of malpractice. And when we have an example of him doing it right on air. But this, like it talks about here, and this is pointing back to like what John Larson said about talking about what's happening to middle America and how capitalism is shredding them up and that sort of thing. And this talks about here of one of the best examples of how theory misses the mark in relation to mental health is Jonathan Metzl's Dying of Whiteness, How the Politics of Racial Resentment is Killing America's Heartland. And so you can think about this country that all sorts of people know we're having major struggles in that area. Yes, with white men or some of them, that it's getting to a big enough problem. It might even be like of a national concern. And they think that they're going to use these theoretical frameworks to talk to the people and deal with them and help understand them like they have any sort of access to truth. A reasonable person might ponder what can happen internally for someone with a mental health condition when told they should feel the guilt and shame of the privilege they possess.
And it's funny because like this is James Lindsay. He's obviously critical. But
this isn't even James Lindsay. This is a guest writer on New Discourses who is a...
but I mean, that seems like, and they say like, because that sounds evil. Mm-hmm. And and I can just hear my wokey relatives and friends go like, oh no, they don't actually believe that. I mean, we keep talking about it, how like this stuff sounds so crazy, but every time you go look up the original source, like, well, what do you know? There it is. Just like they said it was.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you know?
What theory actually manages to get right can be much better delivered through applied universal liberalism, which fundamentally focuses on the individual. This implies a few key ideas, such as the idea of an objective reality that we can know things about. And this kind of hyperlinks to that. But
see, and that's the thing I love that about, because like I remember realizing after, a couple of years of listening to the debate every which way, where it's like, because like, running into presuppositionalist Christians. I don't know if you've ever argued with a presuppositionalist Christian. Although that reminds me, we got to reach something.
But they still believe we're kind of like there's a reality there after they get past their
Yeah, they just say that reality is proof that God is real. It's just like knowing your shit when you're talking with a critical theorist. It's the same thing as talking to a presuppositionalist. If you know your shit ahead of time, then you can just bypass their entire game. But if you don't, you end up in that exact same place where you have to, you're just trying to nail down those two premises that like the universe exists and it's possible to know things, but yeah, really you just spend your time constantly fighting with them. But someday we got to tell the story about how you guilted the nationally syndicated Christian talk show host into praying for Obama.
Yep, I did that. But I'm a alt-right troll. But That's a true story. Yeah. Let me read this paragraph. I like this paragraph. Mental health professionals often work with individuals who are considered to be out of touch with reality in one form or another. Well, you might go to college now and learn how you should be out of touch with reality because reality is not there. The most heavily empirically supported therapy for mental health conditions is cognitive behavioral therapy, which has roots in Stoic philosophy. The theory relies heavily on the assumption that objective reality both exists and we can know things about it. Man, those theories that rely on that they're just not so hip in academia right now.
It's a racist idea.
In many ways, CBT can be said to improve the mental health of clients because it trains them to better view objective reality. Clients who take on CBT can learn to challenge negative automatic thought patterns that form over time, which can cloud judgment and have the tendency to form our perceptions of an event, whether the event was good or bad in a negative way. Critical theory is teaching you how to not do that. It's teaching you how to be the opposite of that. It's teaching you how to problematize and find the negative thing that's wrong with every single thing you see in the world.
Well, just anxiety and stress. Critical theories fetishize, I can't say things right now, fetishize anxiety and stress. Like, oh, you feeling stress? That's telling you that you're being oppressed right now and you need to do some praxis and cry and find a teddy bear and then, post about on Twitter about how brave you are for going out in the world despite, being critically conscious.
Yeah.
Because that, you got to do that emotional labor. That's one of those wonderful phrases. I love all these weird neologisms they gave us, like emotional labor.
Oh, yeah. Cognitive behavioral therapy clients can also learn about thinking errors they commonly use, such as filtering, magnifying negative details, while filtering out positive details of a situation. That's what critical theory is just teaching you how to do all day and night at school.
Absolutely.
Black and white thinking, all or nothing fallacy.
Yes, they do that, literally.
Overgeneralizing, jumping to conclusions.
Yep.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah.
Emotional reasoning. And mind reading.
Well, it's all there.
Being wary of when we err through these cognitive distortions helps us actually think better. It's just that we are more likely to think more on par with reality and view our circumstances in an accurate light. Theory simply does not fit, rejecting CBT's theoretical underpinnings outright and working as a kind of reverse CBT in practice. It is reverse CBT in practice.
It is.
It's how to do all of these things to everything you read and look at all the time. There's that famous Anita Sarkeesian quote. It's like, everything's racist, everything's sexist, everything's this or that, and we've got to point it all out.
Yeah. No, and also, you think about it, it's training somebody to be totally neurotic and incapable of getting along with other people.
Like, maybe sometimes there's a truth to some of those things or whatnot, but it's training you how to do it beyond reality. It does not need to reflect or be accurate or be true to reality. That's part of the point of standpoint epistemology, is that if you announce something was racist, or if you announce something was felt wrong to you or whatever, it's just officially true under that epistemology. It doesn't have to accurately reflect reality. There's also these concepts of like death of the author that come out of these theories, which the point is that the intention of an author or a person, even like a microaggressor, I really hate the concept of microaggression, because like a true microaggression frequently is something where the person was intending to be polite or nice or outgoing with another person.
Yeah,
call it an aggression.
Most of what gets called a microaggression is there's no aggression.
Yeah.
There's none.
This is going into more detail about it. Black and white thinking, the anti-racism stuff is black and white thinking. You're either with us or against us. There's no not racist. There's only racist or anti-racist. And anti-racist
there is no good whiteness. What is the D'Angelo quote?
Oh, yeah, there's so many like that, but I know which one you're saying. I couldn't repeat it off the top of my head. But these guys, you have to actively do it all day, every day, and see it in all interactions. There's the question isn't, did racism happen? It's how did racism manifest itself? It's always there, no matter what. Catastrophizing, speech and words are legitimately violent. Take it up to its like next level. Pointing out an inconvenient truth is violence. This is the realm that Flip and I have been living in. It's really the thing we're talking about, where your activism your activism can't take criticisms we give to it, no matter how politely we give to them.
Yeah.
Because if we point out an inconvenient truth about some of the stats in policing, or some of the stats or hardline truths of differences between genders, or some of the hardline truths about...
Or if I just ask you to produce the video that you tell me exists of you being assaulted by a police officer so I can see it.
Yep.
Just do that much for me. I mean, also, I mean, like, I think I talked about it before, but there was the Cottonwood police protests that happened last year in the midst of all the Black Lives Matter stuff. And, and I got into it with a friend of mine who's a local preacher. He's a local Presbyterian minister, but he's been sucked into all this stuff. And, like these people, like they goaded the police into a confrontation. And the reason I know they did is that after the fact, they all complained about how, oh, we were just doing our peaceful thing and the police came and dispersed us and said we weren't allowed to, blah, blah, blah. Where it's like, well, no, like always there's video of this thing. And they said like, oh, like, because the cops came out and said like, we just asked them to move to the sidewalk. And they said there was no room on the sidewalk. Well, there's video. And you can even see the video where they have this conversation. And the cop says, he waves his hand, and you can see in the video, like, there's just more than enough space to accommodate everybody in their peaceful protest. And that's and I called him out for lying about this. I can't remember exactly what got us on this tangent, but I guess it's that thing where, I don't know, it's okay to lie. For one thing, it's okay to lie in the name of the social justice in this case.
But you pointing out the inconvenient truth.
That's right. It was me pointing it out. Well, yeah, and like, I mean, I guess I still got invited to the Christmas party. He's Christian ultimately. I guess he has to forgive me.
But the pointing out the inconvenient truth is
that's right.
why we must be smeared by Larson, or you got smeared by Lindsay Hansen Park because you pointed out an inconvenient truth, because that's easier than just admitting the inconvenient truth.
That's the thing I always wonder. I mean, I guess I know the answer, but like I try to put myself in the place where, Lindsay Park is ultimately like a rational person who's interested in truth. Like I don't believe that anymore, but it's like, what do you lose, Lindsay, as a feminist? What do you lose if you admit my point, which is true, which is, like just basically the family law system is messed up.
Well,
That's
even when you guys had that fight about it, it was in the context of stuff having to do with the border and separation of parents.
Exactly.
So what do you lose by saying it's atrocious separating parents and their children?
No matter
what. And then you
what.
say, well, how about with dads and their kids? And what do you lose by saying, yes, that's also atrocious, right? In that moment.
I know, in reality, I know what it is that they lose. And that is that Lindsay has been talking about the patriarchy as though it's real.
Yeah.
And she would have to admit, like, well, here's a place, and that's the thing is, it's the same. I guess it's the same problem where Mormons run into if you admit that prophecy isn't always prophecy. Well, okay, then when is it? Like, where are all the rest of the times where it's wrong? And I mean, I guess that's what that's what she had to lose, was that she couldn't cling to her stupid, evil conspiracy theory about the patriarchy anymore. And that's the thing. It's like, because at that time I still kind of believe that there was like a practical feminism that was being subverted by like weird critical intersectional type feminism. And I didn't realize till later, like, oh no, feminism has basically always been a weird subversive Marxist supremacist operation, pretty much through from the start.
The 1800s. I was reading this other thing about the whole formalism movement was a movement in the 1910s by a Russian it was done in opposition to being sick of certain texts being read through the context of Marxism and feminism.
Yeah.
And this is in 1910.
One of my favorite little tricks, I mean, it obviously never sticks, but I've done this a few times, and it's always fun to watch people's faces, because when you're talking to any kind of normie lefty, or even like a full-on wokey, especially a feminist, it's always fun to do this, is because I'll ask them, like, do you know the history of the suffragette movement? And they like, yes. Do you know the history of the suffragist movement? And they go, yes. And I say, what's the difference? And you see their brains completely shut down because they have no idea. Most of them have never considered that there was a difference, that suffragists and suffragettes were not the same thing. And and there's a, look into it, look into it. What was the difference? Why did they not get along? Who was responsible for the bombings?
Yeah.
Like,
Pointing out the inconvenient truth is violence. That's the main problem with the activism that we're dealing with today. There was Quick had a guy on this week who was trying to Quick is he's another podcaster from the believing side who has read a lot of critical theory stuff. And that guy was trying to like bring in a bunch of these critical theory terms and claim that he was doing them in a liberal way through his company that he's a lawyer for. And he mentioned like different little studies of like cognitive bias studies that we already know from. There's a long article by Jesse Singal who just it shredded up those studies since years ago, but we already knew about it since long before that they don't pass certain muster that's required for certain types of testing. Like for me to use a test at my workplace, I would have to prove construct validity and construct reliability to be allowed to use them legally. And people just use these cognitive bias tests like they're nothing. They do not pass those requirements. But I mentioned that. He mentioned one of the oft-cited studies that said all these resumes were sent out that had these black names on it and these white names on it, and the white name people got all the callbacks and all the black name people got none of the callbacks. If that person is a hardcore activist, because I put in the comments that same study has been done. Hello, Kitty. That same study has been done with black reading names that are high class and white reading names that are low class, and the exact reverse happened.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe more of like a class issue or something like that. I don't know how that guy would have reacted or not. As a liberal, he can cite that, and then I could correct it, and then he could take it into an account and say, well, maybe there's something we got to figure out here. But if he's going to be one of these activists, if he cites his part and I cite my part, fire and flames and brimstone. It's you shut up, you violent bigot.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the issue that we run into is that, like, statistically, it shows that we have equality in America for the most part. We have more equality in America than any other place or time in history. That's what the data shows. And that's terrible news to the activists, because they don't say, oh, good, job done, we can pack up. Obviously, they don't do that. And that's one of those things that strikes me as like how angry feminists get when you point out, if anything, women, like young women particularly, are getting paid more for the sake of being women than being men. And they get mad at you for delivering the news. Like, and that's what's so scary, because it's like, well, wait a second, wasn't that your goal? Wasn't your goal that women and men made the same amount of money, all things considered? Okay, you're there.
Our liberalism passed a law about it in 1963 called the EPA, the Equal Pay Act, and you've been able to make a claim about it that I've been on the other sides of those claims, and they're extremely difficult for a company to fight off. I had a claim. I'm going to talk about this because it was a long time ago. The company doesn't even exist now, so I'll actually say an exact example that I saw. A woman in one of my companies got passed over for a job because the job was given to another minority woman. She wasn't a minority. The other woman was a minority. She filed a claim that she did not receive that for sexism. We had to fight that claim. We fought that claim for a year and a half. And here's the other deal about it. They gave the woman who made the claim the same amount of money that they gave the woman who got the job. And she's making the same amount of money. She just didn't get the title. But the person who did get the title was a woman and a minority. And we still had to fight that claim and lose the claim and appeal it and fight it. And you want to know what? I never even found out what the outcome was. You can imagine how much money we already spent on it, fighting it. They should have just put the money out there for it. I don't even think it got out. We did get an outcome because that company went under for COVID before the outcome even ever happened.
But what would they do? I guess it's hard to ask the question, because like, this is what we're getting at, is that they don't actually have goals. The activism is the goal.
Yep.
The activism is what you're doing.
Yep.
There's no end to it. There's no winning. There's no going home.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not just because, I mean, even if they win, you'll see if you like watch any sort of thing like where AOC gets a victory and find in their victory speech there is another call to arms in the
But
victory
we have
speech.
more to do.
Yeah. To the theory, disagreeing with any of their premises, violence. Concept creep takes hold. What's concept creep? Well, I watched John Larson do concept creep, where he willingly explained to us why white supremacy used to have very specific meaning in this country.
Yeah.
Well, they've gone and Mott and Bailey'd it and changed it into this thing that it's just like any sort of white majority thing is now white
Yeah,
supremacy.
like literally anything. Because you think about how these ideas about supremacy work. You know, like I think about the Nation of Islam and like what they actually believe about the origins of the races. You know, where like that's an actual racial supremacist ideology, with like, you know, a whole narrative and supposed history and all that other stuff. But like you say, like white supremacy now.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that they talk about, that postmodern angle, that say music is white supremacy or the science is white supremacy, which is part of the theory that if you inconveniently say back to them, no, this science is science, it's not just a white construct. That's one of the inconvenient truths they don't like to hear. They don't like to hear that, no, this science is just science here. Like the boiling point of water is just science here. It's not a Western construct. But that counts inside of the things that they don't like hearing back about, not just these statistics that don't work towards their activism statistics.
Yeah.
Like think about, well, like I was saying earlier, the supremacists who charted out music, like those German supremacists, those supremacists who you and I idolize, we have a friend who Supersonic idolizes that we know about, and those guys were supremacists to us. Like they looked down on us. Like if they were supremacists, they were German supremacists. I mean, at that time it was kind of like German idealism, you know, but which later morphed into Nazism. But if like they did like kind of view themselves as like a superior race, like it doesn't undo the musical theory when even those same people would have been as supremacist to us as they would have to any black person, you know?
Totally. And this is all aside from the whole thing. I mean, like when John Larson, when that YouTube comment section brought up white supremacy, you know, and I just asked him like white is not even an unambiguous term.
Yeah.
Like, what do you like? It you can't nail it down to anything really useful. It's at best a very general catch-all.
If people would actually listen to their side, but if you talking all the way back to the John Stuart Mill things, if you don't know their side, you don't know me all. Some of the funniest arguments I ever saw was Sargon of Akkad versus Richard Spencer, and Sargon of Akkad jamming Richard Spencer about what whiteness is. Like if you really wanted to kind of like get good arguments about how whiteness doesn't even make sense, I mean, you could have heard it from listening.
Yeah, ask a white nationalist.
Yeah, and that stuff was like almost hilarious to listen and sort out. But there's all sorts of stuff that you hear. I remember there was this guy, Nick Fuentes, and he got in super trouble because he was making these jokes about cookies in the oven and counting how many cookies go in an oven and how many cookies in an oven it takes to get to 6 million cookies. And they were bringing up through the joke the concept that there wasn't enough time to kill that many Jews in ovens in the Holocaust. And they got all banned and people shouldn't listen to it and they can't hear it and you can't listen to this stuff. Well, I remember at that time frame, I listened to the thing too and I was like, well, yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Let me look into that. And I looked into the concept, and through looking into that and hearing even just kind of like dumb idea through a joke, I learned so much about how many freaking ovens there were in the dang Holocaust. Like it's like one of those things that's like you can learn so much by hearing even somebody stupid say something stupid.
There's a good somewhere, I mean there's more than one, but there's one really good Christopher Hitchens clip on YouTube where he's talking about the value of free speech. And he makes that exact point, is that the reason, the argument for allowing Holocaust deniers the right to say their thing is because it's by investigating their claims that you learn the Holocaust was real. You know,
I didn't know Hitchens said that directly. I mean, I probably heard it at the time, but like I lived that.
I
lived that experience. I've lived that experience of hearing some deniers make a claim, and I look into like the claim, and I go, "Holy crap! There were over 1,000 ovens going."
Yeah,
all the time.
And they kept careful records, and there's construction records, and yeah, like this isn't mysterious. Like, yeah, it isn't like surmised.
And so
6 million
that
Jews
like
got
this idiot
killed.
kid making like an idiot joke, through that moment I was able to like have like a moment of shock of the horror of that whole entire thing. And it's just there's so much to be learned from hearing what other people think or say or even get wrong. Like, it's one of the things about thinking go around banning misinformation is the way you learn about stuff in this world and learn well about it is by going and poking through misinformation, then hearing the other side, then hearing the other side, then hearing the other side.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess to the religiously minded, that's the thing, is that like, yeah, there is no other side, you know, at least no side with any value. Like, that is something that like I feel like we got steeped in, was that like there's always value in hearing the, your opposition. I remember learning about the American court system, and that really coming down to me, that whole idea about how they formalize that thing where like, no, you get to make a case and then somebody gets to explain point by point why they think that case is wrong. It's like, and yeah, to me and you, those things just seem so natural. and I'm realizing more and more and more that like to young people, they're not.
Yeah.
It's not natural to even consider that a good thing anymore.
Part of all this explanation I'm doing is because I kind of assume in my brain that people of our age group and of our time frame are going to just hear these things and to learn like what it, because so much of what the stuff is doing is hiding what it's actually doing and actually believing, from trying to parasitize old liberal-minded people, because there's barely any liberals anymore. I mean, that's really the only thing we're ultimately standing up for is like actual liberalism, because there's no party that's standing up for it. The thing that when I go saying this and saying, hey, once we point this stuff out to you, you liberal-minded people, just actually hearing what it is, if you can actually get to the point of believing us that it is what it is, you're just gonna be like, well, I don't agree with that. And it's that simple. So the part of my whole entire thing is this worldview that I don't agree with. Half of what I'm trying to do is try to get everybody to actually read it. You know,
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying. Like, the thing I disagree with most, and like it's my thorn in my side that I think like drives me to the point of being like, oh my gosh, everybody's got to see this. What I'm trying to get you to do is for you to read it and you to learn what the thing is. These other worlds, what they try to do is try to get you to not listen. Don't go look for the misinformation that John Larson doesn't want you to hear. Me, I want you to go read this stuff. Actually read it. Actually read what's out there, you know.
I remember when I was a kid, I grew up within like, I don't know, 150 yards of a Catholic school and church. And like a couple times when I was a kid, like I'd be out rollerblading or whatever, and I'd notice they're having church, and I'd say, hey, what's going on? They're like, we're having church. And so I'd run home and be like, hey mom, I'm gonna go to Catholic mass. And she'd be like, why? And I'm like, I just want to go see. And I did this 2 or 3 times, and she's like, one day she was like, you're not thinking of joining them. Like, no mom, like that's crazy. And I wasn't ready, at that point I was Mormon. I wasn't gonna say like it's crazier than Mormonism, but that's exactly what was in my mind. Whereas like, so I'm like, let's go see what the Catholics have. I'm like, okay, this is it, weirder than the stuff I'm doing. That was my attitude. But like that same kind of thing where it's like, it's not like I was going to go and immediately fall into it. Like, no, I went and looked. And for me, it was just like, okay, I think I know enough of this. Like, I was like 8 or 9 years old doing this, but although I guess that's a different time. Can a 9-year-old go on their own to a Catholic church in Utah?
Probably not. This is a big one in the ex-Mormon world, and the ex-Mormon world is completely kind of based around this concept.
Yeah.
And I've definitely done this to the Mormon church too myself over the years, but I don't necessarily think at any point or time it's not good to go over all of the reasons why something is problematic or troubling and all that sorts of stuff. But you should do exercises in your head too. Trust me, we've done it as well with critical theory and all stuff. I mean, I come from a world of credulously buying into this stuff at first, and I never was like a full activist. I was just like a young kid who was thinking that we were going after truth and just kind of sitting there being like, well, if these professors say so, I mean, I guess it has to be true. And then just kind of like roasting on it for 10 years and slowly being like, what? No, I don't agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. No, that never made sense. No, that didn't make sense. And then beyond that, seeing it when it starts getting put into action, that it becomes complete insanity. But this stuff here, filtering out good, highlighting the bad. We all know that we're going to do that when we're looking at Mormonism, although the Mormons are going to do that in the opposite direction. I think all of us would do a better job at just maybe trying to kind of look at both, you know. That's what we should be doing at everything. Point to an institution or Western civilization. Point at where it's not perfect. Ignore what it does well. Problematize in a way that aligns with the theory. Read everything in the least charitable light. Infiltrate the institution with Mott and Bailey tactics. Take over and corrupt and dismantle from the inside. I don't think you needed to do any of that to take on Mormonism. You know, like some of it you could have like looked at the negative side, but like starting this level, like where it gets to like, hey, now we're gonna take it over with our stupid tactics of doing these Mott and Bailey tactics and dismantling from the inside type stuff. Like even like maybe up to here, I can go along with you that you're just like criticizing stuff, but then when you start turning into hand bananas to get something, that's where I'm just like off the ship, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't remember which ex-Mormon group I got banned from, because I got banned from at least 3, including Mormon Stories Community. And it might have been Mormon Stories Community, but there was one where there was somebody actively calling for Mormon genocide. And like, it was one of those things where like, it wasn't just me. There was a couple of people like, you're not serious, right? This is like just a really big troll. And it was clear that it wasn't. And, you know, and I was like, no, this is genocide.
Wasn't a troll.
That it wasn't a troll. Like, no, this person really wanted it. Was a transgender lady. I don't know that matters. But like, I remember really being struck by that. And then, you know, I'm saying like, no, this is intolerable. You can't talk like this. Come on. Yeah, and I got thrown out of there. But like, I mean, so like, yeah, like this idea that this doesn't exist where people just want to destroy Mormonism. Like, no, they really do. So they really do.
Well, the other problem with all this is that, especially in the postmodern world, some of the critical theory world tried to curb this off, but in the postmodern world, it's an acid with no container. It doesn't end, and that's the whole point. Like Flip and I could deconstruct the living hell out of Thrive and Larson and DeLynn and Hanson Park till the end of time using these same tactics, like just easily. It's like if you want to, I mean, just this part right here alone.
Well, that's one of those things James Lindsay put so pithily, where he's like, you know, he's like, doing critical theory is easy. Just be cynical.
Yeah.
Just be as cynical as you can, and that's really all there is to it.
Jump into conclusions. Where there exists a group. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways they do that. Emotional reasoning, lived experience is number one.
Yep. Unless, like, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, because your lived experience doesn't matter, but a lived experience of an oppressed class person matters. But it matters over any sort of data or stats or any sort of thing like that. Using any sort of data or stat could be considered violence. Searching for evidence in a situation could be considered violence. Positionality. I mean, it's a little bit hard for people coming into it not knowing, even though you've been saturated in it. I don't care who you are in this world. You've been saturated in this stuff. You're already starting to pick up and buy on a lot of the stuff, even if you didn't know it. But like I said from the start, when we're talking about activism, we're talking about these are all the different little itty bitty ways that standpoint epistemology means how you know things is more superior to some sort of objective Western scientific way of knowing things. And critical conscious wokeness, Acton White, mind reading, death of the author type stuff. Then especially like the reason I like this article a lot and brought it up is because this is just looking at one area of the world where it's becoming a major problem, which is counseling. But they have all this stuff, and we can show you threads of it to the end of time, of this medical lysinkoism, where they're starting to move this stuff into all sorts of fields of the medical world. And if you start thinking about applying all these theories to any sort of concept in medicine, it can start getting wonky very, very fast to a point where it gets dangerous. It becomes lysinkoism, or lysinkoism. How would you say that in the
Lysenko.
Lysinkoism?
With a Y in Russian and most Slavic languages, when you see a Y, it's an I, as in like fit. Lysenkoism.
Lysinkoism, and I'll probably just keep calling it lysinkoism.
Yeah, it's your English brain wants to do that. It's normal.
Yeah. White women's tears, white fragility, all that sorts of stuff. That's why I say like you're not safe, Lindsay Hansen Park. She probably already knows that, although she's probably flagellated herself plenty of times over that already in the past. But there was last time this linked directly to another article that criticized, which I wasn't going to go over, but on the same website, it's got a little article that goes over how the 1619 Project starts with that premise that's just a complete lie. And not only is it a lie, it was a lie that they were warned about and that they were fact-checked about by historians before ever publishing it. And those historians came out and announced that they fact-checked and told them to fact-check that before publishing it, and they went ahead and published it as is. It's
taking that, like, because there's the Rolling Stone rape on campus article that, like, it got published, and then almost immediately regular internet sleuths were able to belie that the whole thing was fabricated. And if you remember after that, the defense from Rolling Stones was, well, even if this didn't happen, it's the kind of thing that happens.
That's one of the defenses that the Black Lives Matter gave on Jussie Smollett situation.
Yeah, but that's what the 1619, like, well, even though, like, our America wasn't founded on slavery,
you know what we mean.
It's the kind of thing that happens.
You know what we mean.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that America would do. That's what they're saying.
Flip and I have been sharing examples between each other for 7-8 years now. I mean, how long? I mean, before that Jonathan Haidt video came out, that's 4 or 5 years ago. We were already long on to this, saying like, what the heck is going on here? And we already knew what was going on at some level. It's just even some people are still hand waving the way that I hand waved about this 13, 14, 15 years ago. But there's no hand waving now. It's not going away. It's not letting up. It's not lightening up. It's not going to lighten up. It's a religion. It's a new religion now.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I try to explain to my dad where, like, I mean, it's something that James Lindsay talks about, but it's like, no, it's not this thing where neo-Marxist ideologues take over American education. It's not happening. It has happened.
Yeah, it's over.
We are already there. The American education system is basically run by neo-Marxist revolutionaries.
Yeah, I mean, it's already happened, and it's already, like you said, gotten into the children. Like I was saying earlier, like, I kind of feel like our age of liberals will see this stuff and get it, but at the same time, just like you were saying, if I tried to talk about it to some young kids, some of the stuff isn't going to be naturally something that they would cringe at. They might think, well, yeah, that's how it goes. Standpoint epistemology, somebody's lived experience might be
the way I learned it was that, like, when America was at its most racist is when it wasn't following the principle of due process. The kids these days learn that due process is racist.
Yeah.
It's the dead opposite.
That it's said in that same article that I already clicked off of, is that just because theory might point out where an institution did fail at one point or another, doesn't mean that the right idea is to rip down that institution. And one of them especially is the whole concept or precepts of liberalism, which is why the whole point of that arguing for the null and that last thing that I was talking about, as I was pointing out how people say, well, what's your big problem with John Larson? Is I say almost in the worst way of pretending like they're middle of the road liberals and tearing down a liberal principle right in line with critical praxis is far worse than the actual whatever blue hairs out there directly screaming to tear down the liberalism, you know. And I want to make a super list of it because there is some, think of a liberal precept, there is some shitty activist slogan that might be screamed at you with a sign in your face against that liberal principle, named liberal principle. There's a shitty slogan against it. And people don't even realize how badly we've been baked in the stuff of claiming that it was the liberalism that, even though it was the liberalism that incrementally got them to this place. And I'd even put part of it is like the incrementalism of the religious side of it too. And that's one of the things I feel I can make an argument better than the religious people can make it, because the religious people want to say it was always right, always the way down. And my concept is, yeah, those religions became liberal. They started doing incremental changes in their morality. And the incremental procedures that they had to slowly become better in certain things are what helped society slowly move into things that worked better than other things did before. And there's a concept in that too, that the slowness of it is part of what helps. 1, 2, 3 revolution, topple over everything, and now we got all the answers, do it right. All you're going to find there is death. You know, you got to slowly increment the things into doing better and figuring things out better and trying it the right way for a little bit and being able to undo a thing if it didn't work so well. Like, I don't know.
So I just did a search on everyday feminism for due process.
Oh, what's
these
it
are
say?
the articles that pop up are Japanese Americans share what we all need to know about World War II incarceration, standing in solidarity with the California prison hunger strike, 7 ways police will break the law, threaten, or lie to you to get what they want, 5 reasons why no one should be legally required to tell their parents about their abortion. Here are 7 ways to fight back against Trump's war on Latinx immigrants. Every man should care about abortion rights. 5 valuable ways to use your white privilege to fight anti-black racism. Why it can be hard to report harmless flirting and why it's still a valid option. How to exercise out of self-love, not due to fat shaming. Okay, that's got to be just due. Like, so I just looked up due process, and like, there's not a single article about like the value of the American jurisprudence. I don't know what the word is.
Jurisprudence. Yeah.
Jurisprudential idea
Common
of
law.
due process. Yeah, like
English
no,
common
it's just
law,
a bunch
yeah.
of axe grinding bullshit. Like nothing about like, you know, like why a rape allegation is not enough on its own to send someone to prison. That's not.
And it only ever takes like a nudge like this to get somebody like Delenn or Larson to start saying, I had to be educated on this, and I learned that due process is actually not very good because
Yeah.
because like
it
you
has
said,
failed in the past.
it's failed in the past, or somebody didn't get the due process. Like
Yeah.
if they had gotten the due process, it would have gone better, but they didn't get the due process.
Alrighty.
Well, we made the case that we'll have to make more and more and more and more and more and more and more of until the end of time, and they'll still just say, "Nuh-uh, due process bad."
Yeah.
Which that my whole entire argument in that last video, in case anybody missed it, although they probably aren't listening this far if they didn't listen, is that John Delenn, you need due process. You need in your life innocent until proven guilty.
That was one of the later, but not the last, blow-ups I had with Lindsay Park on her page, was that I said exactly that because Lindsay had put out something about the allegations, and of course, she's been doing the listen and believe all this time, and then until it happens to a friend of hers, and then so suddenly she's all torn, and I said he deserves his due process, and I got piled on by feminists who explained to me that due process is just a tool that the patriarch uses to let rapists get away with rape. It's It's
Yeah,
that
I mean,
simple.
it's the ultimate thing with like Larson and Delin that we're both saying that, hey, you guys should be able to have a podcast and make money off your podcast, and you guys should be able to be thought leaders because you're white males who make money, and you guys should be given due diligence and due process. And it's this other side of extreme activists that you guys pay lip service to, who want to deconstruct you, and all we're deconstructing is how you somehow, some sort of way, want to silence us.
Yeah,
I think at the same time they don't want Kate Kelly being spoken to. There's a reason you don't see Lindsay Hansen on those episodes every other week, like you might see John Larson. But so somehow they're walking a tightrope that they got to both shut us up, pay lip service to them, but shut them up all at the same time. It doesn't make a lick of dang sense. You know?
It is so ironic that like you and I were two of the early loud voices saying when the allegations against Delin came out, that you and I were the ones saying like, well, hang on, put the brakes on this. You know, he deserves his day, right? You know, like, and I have been like, I checked again. I can't even search for the Mormon Stories podcast community. Like, I'm not just
you're kicked off. I don't even remember the reason you got kicked off of it.
I don't remember that one either. I mean, in every case, it's always the same reason. Like the details are different. The reason
you said
is always
some
the same.
sort of fact that you weren't supposed to say.
Yeah, I made a watertight argument that ran against Mormon Stories Foundation orthodoxy, and the other thing is that I would double down. It's like because people, you know, I wouldn't ever back down when people would pile up on me and just, you know, I mean, that's one of those things, like, I don't know, because people just start throwing all the allegations and stuff, and I just, you know, like I was like, show it, you know. But they never do. But yeah, no, that's like,
I was kicked off of another friend's site or page. I think it's just his own thing because he was, and I think I met him through Mormon Stories, and we were talking about the virus or whatever, and I made the same point that Bill Maher made and so many other people made, that it wasn't racist to say that it came from China. And well, but in essence, Trump is sort of trying to do that. And then at the end, like I made the point showing that Bill Maher had made the same point. I made the point showing that Sam Harris had made the same point. He still removed me from the page and said, maybe you're right, but you don't have to be such a tool about it, you know?
And
I go, well, how was I a tool? Except I was very direct. I was direct. I was straight and direct. Like no cutting corners, no saying, hey, asshole, no saying any sort of thing like that. I was straight and direct. No, it is not. No, it is not racist to do that. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And well,
and also, I mean,
off the page, you might be right, but you're an asshole.
Because the other thing is the part where they just betray their total ignorance of the world, because Chinese is not a race. It's not even a language.
Yeah, Han Chinese are only something like 85%.
It's most Chinese people are Han. But yeah, like not all Chinese are like there's not a Chinese language. Chinese is a family of languages. Dozens or hundreds.
The clip from Bill Maher I showed him is Bill Maher is the one who made the point that like thousands of other diseases have been named for the place that they came out of for years.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a thing where they pretend like it's an issue at the moment when it's convenient. Like what's it, sexual preference? Oh, you can't say sexual preference. That's not nice.
Yeah, they suddenly changed the definition.
They suddenly changed that into not okay. And you know, just like how cultural Marxism used to be a thing, and now it's just a wild, outright anti-Semitic conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But you know, and that's the thing is because you and I sit here and go like, you know, how stupid do they think we are? But the thing is, this shit works. Yeah. Because my little sister told me that there's no such thing. I mean, that cultural Marxism is literally nothing more than an alt-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Like,
I'm not trying to create a movement. I don't think you're trying to create a movement. Even on this channel, I think we'd kind of like to get into goofing around and even doing stuff, or even playing some music or something, you know. But I'm not going to try to be John Delin or something like that. But even if I wanted to, our angle right here, there's no way we're never going to get 40,000 subscribers for maybe if like it broke like national or something like that. But inside of the ex-Mormon community, no chance. There's no way we're ever going to do that unless we start playing some of the bullshit game. And but it's the same thing as like when we knew we could never start an MLM either, because you know, like I went and I took some classes I was going to go get an MBA, and they said, oh, one of the first things we're going to do is like to have an ethics class. I'm like, oh, is that where they teach you to not have ethics? Because then you'll be able to do the stuff good, you know. And we've known forever. I mean, we could go start a religion, we could go start an MLM and be in for a whole lot of money, but we'll be stuck down here with 100 subscribers or whatever. That's fine, but
it's the part where you have to be honest, and you can't. I don't know. I mean,
that's one of the criticisms. That's one of the criticisms of liberalism or whatever, is that like your methodology of hard truth or hard science or hard whatever doesn't gel people together as well as these narrative worlds.
And then also just that activist need, because the activism. I don't like. There's so many things that people do that are completely senseless, and yet, I think they exist as. I mean, like think like organic food, and it's funny because like this is one where it's like so sensitive, because I know so many people, including supposedly scientifically minded people, are like, well, no, it's still really important, and like it's important to avoid GMOs and stuff. Like no, it's all magic, it's all magical thinking, but you think that you are doing something for yourself and for the world by buying organic, and you think that because they've managed to convince you of that through their terrible marketing, and I mean not terrible marketing, it's excellent marketing, and like. I make people so mad all the time because I don't know. I try not to bring it up so much because people are so sensitive. But like, I say like I actually go out of my way to avoid buying organic because, like the 4 biggest claims about organic food are lies. Mm-hmm. They don't use chemicals, lie. It's better for the environment, lie. It's better for small farmers, lie. And it's better for you, lie. None of that's true.
It kills less animals.
Lie. Yeah, it kills less animals. Lie. Like, like none of that's true. But like, but you can't get people to stop that because like you take away that little thing, because it used to be that like you just have to go to the grocery store and live with the fact that you were a consumerist fat capitalist filling up on your Cheerios. But no, I bought organic Cheerios. I bought organic fair trade Cheerios, and now I'm not exactly the same kind of capitalist fat.
And it's one of the ways that, I mean, we're just forever going to lose to it anyhow. And
I think like maybe it is the new recycling, Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm woke, I'm racially conscious. Watch me go.
We're screwed.
Yeah. Alrighty.